Hi everyone! We are getting ready to start our Unit 3, which is going to be focusing on the establishment of our new government and understanding how the first government we established under the Articles failed and led us to the Constitution, which we still have today. This is how you're going to set up your notebook for today. 3.1, Articles of Confederation is your title. The objective for today, you will be able to describe the weaknesses under the Articles of Confederation by analyzing the powers under the Articles of Confederation. On the left-hand side of your notebook, you need to make sure you have this information. The Republic, underneath the Republic, fear, problem, and Republic. The Articles of Confederation, fear of expansion, fear, Land Ordinance of 1785, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, and weaknesses of the Articles. Again, please make sure you give yourself space between each one of these items, as you'll be needing that when you fill in the right-hand side of your notebook. So just to give you guys a little frame of reference and where we're at underneath the New Republic, if you guys remember correctly, women during the Revolutionary War were fairly involved. You may remember this image right here as one of the ones that you analyzed, where we see Molly Pritchard, and her husband collapsed of exhaustion. She stands up and starts using the cannon. And because we lost a lot of men in the Revolutionary War because of resources, women really stepped up and helped out a lot. Women were slightly involved in what was happening. And to give you another frame of reference, so this is from the play Hamilton about the Schuyler sisters, and it does show that, and Schuyler sisters were one of them ended up marrying Alexander Hamilton, but they have a lot of opinions, and they want to go downtown and find out what's happening with the revolution. And I think it gives you a good frame of reference as to women and their thoughts during that time period.
There's nothing rich folks love more than going downtown and slumming it with the poor. They pull up in their carriages and walk at the students in the colleges to watch them talk. Take Philip Schuyler, the man is loaded. But little does he know that his daughters, Peggy, Angelica, Eliza, stay in the city just to watch all the guys.
Angelica, Eliza, and Peggy, the Schuyler sisters. Angelica, Peggy, Eliza. Daddy said to be home by sundown. Daddy doesn't need to know. Daddy said not to go downtown. I said you're free to go. But look around, the revolution's happening in New York. It's bad enough that he wants to go to war. We'll shout in the square. It's bad enough there'll be violence on our shore. No ideas in the air. Look around. Angelica, remind me what we're looking for. Eliza, I'm looking for a mind and work. I'm looking for a mind and work. I'm looking for a mind and work. Whoa.
There's nothing like summer in the city. Someone in a rush, sniffing someone looking pretty. Excuse me, miss, I know it's not funny, but your perfume smells like your daddy's got money. While you slumming in the city in your fancy heels, you're searching for an urchin who can give you ideals.
Sir, you disgust me.
So you disgust me. I'm a trust fund, baby, you can trust me.
I've been reading Common Sense by Thomas Paine. Don't men say that I'm intense or I'm sane. You want a revolution, I want a revelation. So listen to my declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And when I become a Jefferson, I will compel them to include women in the sequel. Look around, how lucky we are to be alive right now. Look around, how lucky we are to be alive right now. History is happening in Manhattan, and we just happen to be in the greatest city in the world. In the greatest city in the world.
So that should give you guys a good idea of just kind of like women, and they had opinions during the Revolution. So what happened after the Revolution? How were women viewed afterwards? If we think a look about them during the Revolution, they were, helped out. And what contradictions were there? And I think when we listened to that video, we saw the contradictions of the women want to be created equal, and they weren't created equal. Even in the Declaration of Independence, it only said all men are created equal. So I want you to think about how they are viewed while establishing our new government. What do you think their expectations were? And the expectations were for them to be more of the Republican motherhood. Women were now expected to stay at home, raise the next generation of patriots, and teach these democratic ideals. So it was like, okay, thank you for your help during the war. Now you stay home and teach democratic ideals to your youth. Some of these ideas were the concepts of a republic. There was a fear in the colonies after our independence that we were afraid of a strong, powerful nation. So having a strong central government was something a lot of people were afraid of. So they favored state governments and more individual power. The problem with this, though, was that the states didn't get along with one another. So each state had different needs, had different requirements, and so trying to get the states to agree on something was very difficult, and they very often disagreed with what was best for the nation. But they agreed on the idea of a republic, and a republic is a government where citizens rule through elected officials. So they did agree with that concept, and that was the concept that they wanted the women to be teaching at home to their young children, was this idea that we elect officials and those officials rule for us. So we are participating in the government through our elected officials. So the Continental Congress got together and established the Articles of Confederation. They answered a few questions. They were trying to figure out who should have the power and how the states were going to be represented. And they came up with the Articles of Confederation, and confederation means alliance. And they decided that the new government was going to have two branches, one federal branch and one state branch, and that the power was going to be divided in between them. Well, again, that didn't work out very well. There was a lot of fears happening. There was a fear of expansion, and if some states expanded, then those states would become way too powerful. And what about the small states? The small states wanted to make sure they had a voice in something. They were able to come up with two ordinances that were successful. The Land Ordinance of 1785, which determined how we would survey the land, which just means how are we going to mark the land and evaluate the land. And then after that, they came up with the Northwest Ordinance, which was dividing this land into the territories and developed a plan for how to admit new states to the nation. And so you can see that that was effective right here with the entrance of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota eventually. And that was all created because of this Northwest territory. So that was something that they were successful with underneath the Articles of Confederation. However, there was a lot of weaknesses in the articles as well. And right here is where we see these weaknesses. Now, you are going to need to write this chart down. And if you want to shorten it a little bit, you are more than welcome to do that. But you need to know that these were the weaknesses underneath the articles. The first is taxation. The federal government could not tax. And so we couldn't predict when we would have money. So the federal government could never predict when they were going to have money. Trade and commerce. The states were constantly competing with one another because we didn't have one federal government that was in charge of trade. And so it was hard to trade with other countries. There was no national military. States didn't have to give troops or money for troops, and so it was hard to protect ourselves against foreigners. One vote per state meant that there was a lot of unequal access. So the larger states that had a lot of people in it only got one vote, but so did the small states. They only got one vote. So it sounds equal, but really everybody wasn't represented properly. And you needed to have a unanimous vote to change anything. So it wasn't just majority. It was everybody had to agree. And you know how hard it is to get everybody to agree to something. There was no national court, so there was no way to enforce any sort of power or to fix a dispute between the two states. And there was no executive branch. So if we had a Congress, so the federal government had a Congress, when they made up a law, there was no way to enforce that law because we did not have an executive branch. So these are the weaknesses underneath the articles. Moving forward, we're going to talk about what they did next after establishing these weaknesses and determining how they were going to fix them, which eventually led us to the creation of the Constitution.